That was this weekend.
Oh.
But, you know, I'm sure there'll be plenty left if you want to do it next weekend. I was working.
You didn't get it all.
No. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Okay.
We do this. Before I start any presentation off, I guess I really want to talk about, we've had 3 workshops. You know, the first one was knowing your camera. It was basics on taking pictures, exposure, focus, and all that stuff. The second one last month was on, good, we got another person. Hey, how you doing, Tim? Just started off, Tim. And the second one last month was really mostly about composition. And this third one is about post-processing. So I'm trying to talk about the whole cycle of creating art, okay? And I use the word art on purpose and not creating photos, because I want you to think of photography as a visual art form when you just happen to have a camera, all right? So there are people out there who'll tell you what a good picture is. For example, you know how a bird should be exposed, how you should focus on the eyes, how you should be able to see the feathers and all the good stuff. That's a good photograph. But creating art goes beyond that in my mind. I'm a big advocate of post-processing. And that's where the magic happens a lot of times for me. But I want dialogue here, because I mean, we all have different ideas. I've run into many photographers who are extremely proud of the fact that they've never touched their pictures in post-processing. And that usually tells me they don't know how to use it. But I mean, that's my own opinion, but you know, let's have a dialogue. I mean, I don't have all the answers. I have a very strong opinion on post-processing. You know that because you've seen a lot of my pictures. I love to get into it. But you know, creating art is a whole cycle of taking the picture, being out in the field, composing it right, because you're not going to do well in post-processing and the picture's not composed right, and there's some basically good things with it. And then you get into post-processing, and for me, that's where the fun happens. You really get creative. So that's what it's all about today, and we'll get into the presentation here. Let me see if I can get this thing up, and I will get to sharing screens here in a second. Okay, let's share screen here. So don't worry about you know, getting into the you know, interrupting me or whatever. I mean, I don't have all the answers, and let's just sort of talk and see where it takes us. I obviously have a presentation, but that doesn't mean we can't talk over it. That's fine. That's
yeah. My husband thinks he doesn't like me changing photographs that I've taken. But
yeah.
And I get frustrated because I want it to look more arty than I can get it. I don't think I'm quite to the art phase yet, but that's my goal.
Yeah, and that's just, I don't like people to define photography for me as a certain thing, okay? And I'll get into it later. Your photo is not reality. And that's from Ansel Adams. Photos are not reality. People want to make them reality. Well, that's what you saw up there. It was a bird on a stick. Yeah, but you didn't see a bird on a stick. When you were out there looking, you saw something more than that. And that's what you're trying to get across. It's the feeling that you had out there. And so we'll get into a little bit of that stuff. Let me, to me, that's where art comes in. Can you see the beginning of the presentation?
Yes.
You know, this is part 3, re-envisioning. And the reason I call it re-envisioning is the second one was called really envisioning. And it's all about from beginning to end, when you snap the shutter all the way to you do post-processing, art to me implies intentionality. It's all about it being intentional about your work. When you take the picture, you start off with a vision in mind of what you want it to look like. I mean, even Emily, you're sitting out there in your kayak and you're looking at a bird on a log. You're having a feeling about that. And you want to capture that feeling and take it home. And that's the intentional part of it. What is the feeling, and being in connection with that feeling, so that when you finally do get home and you sit down on your PC, you try to bring that out. You try to tell other people your story. I was there in a kayak. I saw this bird. The light was fantastic, and it felt really good. And then you're trying to get that feeling across, and that's the art part of it. Certainly, we can all take a picture of a bird. If we were in the same position, we'd have your same picture. But you know, that's not art. That's a photo. So let's get on to, you know, this part here is about completing your masterpiece, the one you started when you click the shutter, and even before that when you start envisioning. You know, what we won't get into here is heavily into editing techniques and tricks. At the end of this thing, if given time, I'll try to get into some of my photos and walk through a workflow. So for people like John, Brian and stuff, workflow is important. You're getting into it. You want to understand what to use first, second, and third. And while there may be opinions, they're not really opinions so much. I mean, if you get into it, there's a pretty good consensus of how to go a workflow should work. We won't get heavily into editing, but we'll talk about it in a sense that it's conceptual. But we will talk about the post-processing as it can be a sensitive talk, but those people who say, I don't post-process my image, I usually laugh at that because to me, it means they don't know. But there are a lot of people who are very proud of that, okay? And I used to belong, I think it was called the Ugly Hedgehog or something like that. It's a group of photographers online that post pictures and they critique each other. And boy, I got out of it after a while because it got really nasty. I mean, there's a lot of people who have very strong feelings about what a photograph should look like, If you talk to, for example, David Emerson about a bird photograph, I mean, it has to be absolutely spot on perfect. And he's very much into high technical perfection, and that's fine for him. That doesn't work for me, but it's fine for him. It works. That's his vision. So there's it's a sensitive topic, and it's different for different people. We'll get into what re-envisioning means, and why it's different for each person here, basically. And I'll address some of the key success factors to re-envisioning. And we'll maybe talk about what yours are. I can talk about some of the key things I find that make my pictures pop, besides the normal things. You go into Photoshop, Lightroom, and you do open up the shadows, you bring down the highlights, you bring a couple of things like that. That's the standard stuff. I'm talking about the other stuff that makes images pop. So this is what this workshop is going to be about. And please go ahead and give me ideas and talk about it, because you're going to have it different than me, and that's fine. That's fine. The important thing is that I think we understand post-processing, and if we enjoy it, that's what it's all about. The agenda, I'm going to talk about what's the goal of re-envisioning or post-processing. We'll review a little bit about the last workshop, just to talk about what envisioning is and how that plays a part. I'll talk about some tips that make my images pop, I think, for me. Before and after, I have some before and after pictures that I'll talk about what I was thinking about when I took the picture and how I tried to make that come alive in the end through post-processing. Because I'll show you the picture I took, and then I'll show you the final picture and tell you why I did what I did. We'll talk about the workflow, re-envisioning tools in the workflow, and then we'll talk a little bit about shooting with the end in mind. Once you know post-processing and you're good at it, or at least you understand what you can do, it does change how you shoot initially. You'll see things you never saw before, or you might take pictures of things that you wouldn't have taken pictures of before, because you know what you can do with them in post-processing. And to me, it heightens, it increases your love of photography. It's something other, it's more that you can do. And in these times when you got to stay home, believe me, I'm going through all my old pictures of Australia and Iceland and every place I've ever been and redoing a lot of them, just because it's photography. I'm not out there in the field, but I do enjoy working on some images and seeing where I can take some of these things. To me, that's the art. So
a lot of times pictures you took years ago that you thought were fabulous, you go back and look at them and kind of go, ooh.
Well, your taste in post-processing changes tremendously. Yes. I remember when HDR was big when it first came in. And I had several HDR programs, and I would go through and make these things look radioactive, and I was just stunning. I thought that was so cool. They were great looking images. I can't stand to look at them nowadays, And so the things that you did in the past sometimes, that you processed in the past, a lot of times you go way over the top, and it just looks awful now. But that's okay. You had fun at the time, so what's the damage done, right? To me, it's let's have fun. Let's take it where you think you can. And I've been in art a long time in my life, and one of the important things is after you've done something, let it cool off. Go back and let something cool off and look at it later, because it's amazing what things look like a little later. So first of all, it's not what you look at that matters. In the top red bar there, it's what you see. That was a quote I got from somewhere, and I can't remember what it is. So Emily, when you're out in the lake, it's not what you look at that matters, that bird on the stick, it's what you see that matters. Okay, what that bird means to you and the emotion you felt at the time. It's and then in post-processing, to me, it's how well you get across that vision to the viewer. That's your job in taking the picture and then processing it. First of all, have fun. There are no absolutes, and I'll say that right here. I go back to David Emerson, take some beautiful bird pictures, but that's not for me. You give me one of his pictures to edit, and I have a hard time doing anything but making it sharp and making it, cropping it a little bit. I can't add blue sky to it. I can't do neat lighting. I can't do a lot of different things to the picture. It just doesn't get to me. But that's what photography is about. It's different to all of us. We want to complete that artwork that we envision that connects emotionally to the viewer. And we'll talk about why that emotion is important, because emotion is at the very center of art. Then once it engages them emotionally, we want them to see the story. We want them to go through the picture and stay with the picture, and actually using light, dodging and burning and things like that we'll talk about. You want them to lead them through the story of what the picture is. And finally, remain open when you do re-envisioning to something completely different. When you're looking at a two-dimensional image on your screen, it's never going to look like what the three-dimensional image was when you looked at it in the field. It's going to look different. So sometimes you get to the screen, you look at it, and your idea changes. It's completely different. And I can show you an example of that when we get to the before and afters. So my goal is to convince you to loosen up. Don't let yourself be restricted by how others define what a photograph should be, okay? Because others will say, well, gee, this photograph, Ugly Hedgehog was the group I had to quit. Others were telling me how my photos ought to be. And I got a little tired of that. If you ever listen to Scott Kelby, he hates his photos to be critiqued. Man, I was on some sort of workshop or something, and somebody critiqued one of his photos, and he came unglued. Now that that's Scott Kelby. I mean, God, you think he does it all the time. He critiques people's pictures, but be careful. Photos aren't supposed to be anyways. They're supposed to be the way you want them. So your job as a visual artist is to connect emotionally to the viewer and tell their story. It's as simple as that, and as complex as that, if you will, because it is a complex and hard thing to do. And not all pictures lend themselves to that. So let me get a little bit back to what creating with intention is. And this was from the last workshop, so if you've seen it, I'm sorry. The quote down below I like a lot. That's from Minor White. He's a photographer, I think, some time ago. One should not only photograph things for what they are, but for what else they are. Sort of goes back to the last statement I had. There's something else that you're taking a picture of. It's not that bird, or it's not that house or tree or mountain or whatever. You're taking a picture of something else. And that's what you visualize it to be. When you pick that camera up and you look at that beautiful scene out there, the valley down below you. To me, in landscape, I'm typically looking for something that looks like Hobbit country. I see a wonderful place, a place I like to roam, that hobbits live in, and elves and everything else. I mean, to me, I visualize something more than just that mountain out there. And I try to bring that out in my pictures in the end. I'll put little soft glows on the pictures. I'll use lighting and everything else to make it look sort of ethereal and beautiful. That's my vision. Other people see something different. And that visualization impacts everything you do, from knowing your camera to understanding how to shoot, to envisioning the art, understanding how to compose the picture, and getting in the right spot, getting high, low, whatever you do, to re-envisioning it into post-processing. It works. And all those things are important. And they all relate into visualization, sort of an iterative process, continually, iteratively looking back to what you think you wanted to create in the picture. This is in the intentional part. If you don't do this, like a lot of people, you take your iPhone, you snap here, you snap there, you take this picture and that picture, and you never have any idea at all what you're taking a picture of. It's not surprising that a lot of your pictures look like snapshots. And I'm not saying that I do this with every picture, and certainly I don't. I mean, none of us are this intentional with everything we do. Sometimes we just see something and we go, wow, I'll take a picture of it. And later on, you get back into the post-processing and says, what is it that caught my attention? I wish I was more intentional then, but something caught my attention. So if you do it right, you do start off with a vision. At some point, that vision might form just because of the process. And then these things all relate to each other. If you know how to do post-processing, it's going to change how you take pictures in the first place. And if you know how to compose, it's going to make your post-processing a lot easier. And you can also do some recomposing in post-processing by recropping the picture a little bit and things like that. So these things all relate to one another in an iterative process. So that's my creating with intention graph. I believe in complex graphs, so that's life. You know, why re-envisioning matters. And this again is trying to convince people there's always a creative gap. Starting with Ansel Adams' quote up on the top here, photo is not reality. Too many times, way back when photography first started off, it was believed that you took a picture of something and that was reality, that's the way things are. But just the act of taking pictures itself alters reality. The angle you choose to take it at, the lighting you choose, the exposure you choose, even what you decide to take a picture of alters reality. You decide to cut certain things out like telephone wires, or you take that picture of a bird or a house or a tree from a different angle down low to make it look bigger. So you can alter reality just by the act of taking a picture. So it's the picture, first of all, photos are not reality. Your job is not to portray how it looks, is to portray how it felt. That's a quote from Chuck. So I think therefore it's to portray how it felt. It's even more true, I think, when you compare that reality that you experience in the field to the two-dimensional image you look at on the screen. Like I said before, there's no reality in that two-dimensional image. Reality moves all the time. It's never still, and it's three-dimensional. You can move around, make different angles of it. Once you get it on the screen, it's not reality at all. It's a different pictures, and that's what you got to work with. And there'll always be a gap, no matter what you do and how good you are. There's always going to be a gap about what you remembered and envisioned out there when you were on the lake taking that picture of the bird, or in the field taking a picture of a mountain, and what you finally got in the picture. It's almost impossible to ever get 100% of what you saw out there. Now, it doesn't mean that I do take pictures when I travel of things, and I will do very little processing on them because I want to document the field trip. That's documentation, and that's a little different. But when I want to go further than that, that's when things get edited quite a bit. There is a documentary part of photography, and you're trying to create reality as you saw it. But the re-envisioning step at the end allows you to try to close that creative gap with your own artistry. So I think that's why it's important. If you don't want to do any post-processing, then you're a documentarian in my mind. That's fine. You can be a documentarian. I wouldn't necessarily call that an artist, although you could argue with that. There's a lot of photographers in history who've been very good, got out, done street photography and took it pretty straight. I would guess, though, that 99% of them did some post-processing. Ansel Adams certainly did. So even them, they would probably claim they didn't, but they did. Let's talk a little bit about how, before we get into post-processing and all that, what are we trying to do? How do people see your picture? And this comes from the last workshop a little bit too. When a viewer is emoted and your picture's out there on Flickr with 20,000 other pictures, people flick through those things very fast. They don't look at them. Facebook, think of the share and learns that we go through. You had 80 pictures in the last one. How many did you remember? Not that they were bad pictures. None of them were probably bad pictures. They were good. But the ones you remember are the ones that you felt something about. They were emotional pictures. They hit you. So in post-processing, we're talking about presence. We want the picture to have presence, to have pop, so that somebody stops and looks at the picture. Says, "Oh my God, look at that picture." Okay, that's the first step. You have to, and people don't stop unless they feel that presence or that emotion. Okay. The second thing is art is an extension of the conscious mind. The conscious mind enjoys something that's understandable. They can go with it. It's a story there. They can look at the picture and they say, I see the subject. I know what the subject of this picture is, right? If I see something, I'll take share and learn or anything else that's a great picture of something that's confusing. You won't stay with it for very long. You'd like to see that it's got a subject to it somewhere. What is this about? Okay, it's the story. What is this about? So you might have to start, you have to first of all start with a well-composed picture. It does identify the subject clearly, but you may have to recrop and recompose the picture to put the subject in a slightly better position. And there's rules for that. Rules of third, for example, is one of them, golden spiral, and others that we talked about the last meeting. So art does require that, and for somebody to stay with your picture, they have to understand your picture, which you can do a lot of times in post-processing, because our conscious mind is first aware of the initial is initially stimulated by light. So when I look at a picture, my eyes immediately go to the lightest and brightest part of the picture. It's just studies have been done, and that's what people do. And that should usually be the subject. So if your subject's well lit, that's where the eyes are going to go, and they're going to understand. The person who's looking at the picture is going to immediately understand this is the subject of the picture. So in post-processing, brighten the subject. Okay, now of course, if you're taking a silhouette and you have the subject's black against a white background, you're not going to brighten the subject up, but that's the most contrasty part of the picture. So in that sense, in that case, the eyes are going to go where the most contrast is, but it's usually where the brightest part of the picture. You know, one of the rule of thumb in my mind is put light on that subject. Even if you didn't do it in the field, you know, Emily has all these nice lights and for portraits and stuff. If you didn't do that in the field, then do it at home. There are ways of doing that with filters and things in Lightroom to lighten the subject. The radio filter in Lightroom is one fantastic spotlight. And then, you know, finally the visual information. After you've gotten the subject data, I know that subject is the brightest part. That subject's the brightest part of the picture. Then your eyes start to go around the composition, following lines and edges and corners, and it starts to explore the picture. Okay, and you can help the viewer do that through dodging and burning. Okay, dodging and burning will brighten and darken certain parts of the pictures to direct the viewer through the picture. Okay. And we'll talk about dodging and burning. To me, that's extremely important. I probably 98% of the pictures I do some dodging and burning on to bring things up. Go ahead.
Can you tell me real briefly what is meant by dodging?
Yeah, and I'll show you.
Processing.
Yeah, dodging is lightening, burning is darkening. Okay, and that comes from the old chemical times when they were doing it in the Lightroom. They literally burned some parts of the films and some of the parts of what they were doing to darken them. And dodging, I'm not sure what that meant unless they drove a truck over it or something. But
I used to do that, and when you were exposing the film, you could put your hand or a
Yes.
tool to block the light for a little bit. That was dodging.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So in Photoshop and Lightroom, and I will show you an example of that. There's some nice techniques that are non-destructive in Photoshop for dodging and burning. Yes, that's right, Emily. To me, it's important in almost any image to do a little bit of dodging and burning because no light is perfect. And what dodging and burning does is adds complexity and interest to the light. So if I have a little meadow out there that I've taken a picture of, I might darken it down a little bit, and then I'll put some spots of sunlight on it, like the sunlight's filtering through, hitting the bushes in different areas. It just gives it some mystery and some interest and complexity to the light. And I'll show you an example of that, and I'll talk about a little bit about it. And at the end, we have time. I'll show you some technique on doing it. So we can't. Once we get to post processing, we can't. A lot of the compositional rules are locked in. You got a two-dimensional picture. It's sitting there. You either use the rule of thirds or you didn't. Golden triangle, golden spiral, whatever it is you used at this point. You can change some things though. The overall tone and presence of an image you can change pretty simply in Lightroom and other places. And I'll talk about using some tools to do that coming up in the next slide. You can make your subject, we just talked about lightening up the subject and removing distractions. So if there's telephone wires in there, branches, whatever it is that you don't like, you can remove them. You can crop the image or recrop the image a little bit to change the placement of your subject. And I'll show you an example of that. You might get home and you thought you took a picture of one subject. When you look at the picture, I call it a picture within a picture. There's another picture in there. You know, I didn't think of this. This is a better picture. So you recrop the image. Now, of course, if you haven't recrop it too much, that's not too good, but it's nothing wrong. I have a D810 camera. It takes like a 48 megapixel picture. I can crop the heck out of that and it still looks good. You know? Wow. But recropping the pictures, think about that. When you get the picture, the crop tool is there for a reason. Use it. Viewpoint, you can't change viewpoint too much, getting down low or getting up high. But there is a perspective tool that you can use, and sometimes it comes in handy to distort the image a little bit and give it a little bit different look. Leading lines you can do a lot about. There's leading lines in the picture, and if you took a good picture, you might have roads or rivers or different things in the picture that give you some nice leading lines. But if you don't, you can do a lot with dodging and burning and lightening and darkening to create leading lines if you have to. Framing in a picture is another rule that we talk about. Framing, well, there's this thing called vignette. A vignette in a picture that darkens the frame of the outside of the picture. It's a frame of sorts, and it causes the eye to go to the center of the picture. I probably add a little vignette to almost all my pictures at some point, one of the very last things I do. I try not to make it visible, but it's a slight darkening of the edges to bring the eyes in toward the center. And then of course there's image manipulation, and people know me, they know skies are something that maybe weren't there or were there. But I don't, when I get into art and visual storytelling, I frankly, when I'm at that level, if I'm not just documenting what I saw, I don't see anything wrong with manipulating an image. There's no moral question here in my mind. If the image looks better after I've done it, heck, that's what I was after in the first place, you know. So I will replace the sky sometimes, and sometimes I'll even do worse than that. You'll see some examples of that as we get into it. And yes, it goes over the top sometimes, and I'll do that just to have fun. I'll show you a couple of examples of that. So that's that. Here are my 9 tricks, and they go beyond the standard tricks of editing pictures. Editing pictures, you always work with color, you know, saturation. You do things like highlights and shadows and things like that. These are the things that'll make the image go a little further. The first one's pretty easy. Don't spend a lot of time editing your picture and doing the basic things you need to do. In Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, and I use them interchangeably because they're the same, you can speed up your initial edits with profiles, presets, and don't be afraid to use that automatic button. Years ago, Lightroom had the auto button and it didn't work. It was just awful. You'd hit auto and go, oh my God, I don't want that. And you'd unhit it. Nowadays, Adobe uses something called Adobe Sensei, which is artificial intelligence. And they've run millions of pictures through Sensei, and they've got it down pretty good. So if you go into Lightroom, the first thing you do is hit the auto button, all right? That'll save you a lot of time. It's gonna give you a good picture to start with. And the next thing you do is you look at profiles, and you pick a profile. You either do one of these 2 things first, but that's where your starting point for all my pictures is one of those 2 things. And then you can go and adjust from there. You can go and adjust the highlights and shadows and the contrast and curves and all that stuff. So, but first of all, you know, just start off quickly. You don't want to spend a lot of time, bore yourself with these basic edits. Just do that. I think dramatic backgrounds are key to a good picture. And by backgrounds, I mean things like skies. And if you're taking a portrait of a person, maybe an interesting background on that person's portrait. So whatever it is, backgrounds are key to setting the mood and key to some dramatic shots. Don't minimize that. If you have a boring sky, the picture's not going to look that good. Use textures. You know, that's just stepping out a little bit. Like I said, use textures as an overlay. Use blending modes and textures that adds character to an image. And I'll show you an example of that. Some grit and character. It can add some interesting looking shadows and highlights to a picture, depending on how you use them. There's different ways to use textures. You know, dodging and burning, I've talked about that already. You paint with light. That's basically what I call it. It's painting with light. Adds interest and complexity. Where we get here, don't be afraid of the curves tool. The curves tool does a lot. There's a heck of a lot you can do with the curves tool. Don't be afraid of using that thing. It's I
can't believe it.
What's that? Okay. All right. Yeah, that curves tool is something a lot of people don't use. They don't know how to use it. They don't know what it does.
I'm gonna zoom again.
Use filters and LUTs. Okay, what the heck's a LUT? LUT is a lookup table. That's what it's LUT, lookup table. They're called color profiles some places. I'll show you the use of LUTs in Photoshop. And they harmonize. If you have a composite of a lot of different things and you want to give it all the same look, so you brought in some foreground from one picture, some background from another picture, and a sky from a third picture. They may have different tones to them, and they won't look realistic all hanging together. So sometimes overlaying a LUT on top of them will harmonize them.
Yeah, sometimes when I just can't get the color right, if I go to auto color, sometimes it fixes stuff that you've been playing with forever and couldn't get it right.
Well, that's a good idea. What the auto color you say?
Yeah,
Is it in Lightroom or Photoshop?
Photoshop, it's under image
Okay.
and then color, auto color.
Okay, well, I'll have to try that sometime. That's a good idea. But that's the same idea that I'm looking for with LUTs and stuff, is to sort of bring it all together, to tie it together, you know. Sometimes when I can't get the color right, I go to black and white. Well, it happens sometimes. You know, you get that image that's really good, but it has this terrible blue cast to it, and you can't get rid of it. Something like that. You know, you pop it over to black and white, and you've got it solved. You know.
All right.
Yeah, did you have something to pop it up with yesterday?
So a 7 here, Adobe Camera Raw, and for John, you know, you talk about Photoshop, Lightroom, Photoshop, whatever.
Yeah. Just a little stand up.
Let me just try to. You got it, Bill?
Beg pardon?
Yeah, you're okay, Bill? No,
I'm trying to find something to stand my iPad up on. Excuse me.
Okay. Oh, okay. No, I guess I'll wait for a second. You got it? The Adobe Camera Raw, John, you talked about that before, is just like Lightroom. It's the same thing. Okay. But when you're in Photoshop, and Photoshop is complex, don't be afraid to jump over to Adobe Camera Raw and do some stuff in there and then come back. You can come back and forth from Photoshop into Adobe Camera Raw. It's a lot easier and faster to do things like highlights, shadows, and then add some split toning. If you want to add split toning, say for example, you want to add a little bit of blue to the shadows, a little bit of yellow to the highlights. You can do that a lot easier in Camera Raw.
Yeah, Chuck, I did find out by going in there, you go to Digital Camera Raw, and I found like the dehazing and the highlights and the shadows. They're really actually very good tools. I really like them. But back to Emily's point, the one thing I did find in Photoshop, when I first open up a photo and I don't like the color, I hit the auto color first to see if it does anything for me. I find that auto color to be really, really good in Photoshop.
Well, that's good. That's good. I'll have to. I don't use that much, but that would be a good thing.
It doesn't always work, but
No, you're right.
sometimes it really fixes stuff amazingly well.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. But, you know, in the Adobe Camera Raw, don't be afraid to go back and forth on that thing. And one of the ways to do it well is use smart filters. Turn your image into a smart object. That way you can jump back and forth through Adobe Camera Raw and redo what you did, things like that.
Okay.
I'll show you an example of that.
All right, great. Thank you.
Then use brushes out there. A lot of people don't understand brushes, don't use brushes. I think recently, Emily, you got some new brushes and interesting things. You know, they're fun, aren't they? I mean,
They are.
You
Especially if you have like this solid blue sky, it's so boring. There's some really cool cloud brushes you can add.
So you can,
A little bit of interest.
And if you want to have a little storm with lightning bolts in it, you can do that. So I mean, you know, explore your brushes, look at the brushes and see what you've got. And if there, you'll find people out there selling brushes, that sell kits of these things. Consider buying some sometime. I mean, the brushes can do a lot for you. So do use brushes. And then 9, those blending modes in Photoshop, when you do layers, there's something called blending modes. I'm going to turn Bill off just for a second here. Sorry, Bill. Okay. The blending modes in Photoshop are extremely powerful. I mean, they do use them, explore them, understand them. If you see classes online on blending modes, take those classes. They are the key to using layers. Absolutely. The ones I use most.
They've really improved. You can just roll over the list and it shows you what it's going to look like as you roll over. So you don't have to click on them each time.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, before it was like alt click or something. It was a different, you could do it with a shortcut, but it's still, this is much easier. But you're right. You can just roll over the blending modes and they'll show you what they do. You don't have to really understand them too much. But the ones I use a lot are things like soft light, hard light, darken light, and a screen, multiply, and overlay. I use overlay a lot for dodging and burning. So those are sort of my tricks, and we'll get into some of these. Hopefully, I brought up an image, it's funny, that I did last night that tried to use all of these. And my point is, you really shouldn't use all of these. It's I try to sort of do something where I illustrate using almost all of these things. So the image didn't turn out that great in the end because I overdid it, but I was trying to make a point. So those are the nine tricks. Let's get into a couple of before and afters. Okay, let's get here. Before and after. Okay, let's go to the next picture. Okay, this is just a standard landscape for me. This was not overdone. This is the way I do landscapes. So what was I envisioning? I was in the Eastern Sierras, and Jim Skeppins had given me some directions as to where to go. Hey, Jim knows a lot about the hiking in the Eastern Sierras, and before I went on this trip, Jim and I met at Starbucks, and he gave me a lot of pointers as to where to go, and I found some really nice hikes, and this is one of them. What was I seeing when I got to this place? Well, this little bridge, wooden bridge crossing the river there. You could hear the river bubbling. I could look off in the distance. The sky, unfortunately, is not my kind of sky, but everything else was pretty perfect. And yes, to me, landscapes always look dreamy, golden, peaceful, that I want to walk in. I did a lot of hiking. Landscapes draw me in. I want to go out there and walk around that lake. So if you want to think Hobbit country, that's sort of my view. So what did I do to the thing? And of course, the scene's been warmed, as you can see. That I did a sky replacement to put different sky in the scene because I thought backgrounds are important. I added a little bit of glow to the picture using a Luminar plugin. It's a very slight glow, just makes it look a little dreamier. And then I did a lot of dodging and burning to lead the viewer across the bridge and into the distance. So if you look at the trees in the very distance, for example, you see some of them are lighter than the others in my after picture. The before picture, they're not. They're all the same color. So and the shoreline across the lake is very well lit. Plus, going around the lake. So if your eyes start in the front, the bushes are leading up to the bridge are bright. You go across the bridge and follow that light around the lake, and that is intentional. And so I do try to give some dimensionality to trees and things like that with lighting one side and maybe shadows on the other. And then there's a slight vignette on that picture to bring the viewer into the center. So depth and dimension is what I'm looking for. There's some foreground. There's light in the middle at the right where the subject is, which is the bridge, and the background, the lake behind it is well lit. So that's an example of using a lot of dodging and burning to bring out the picture.
Wonderful.
This is another picture I took of bluebells on a hike in Cornwall, England, with my wife. The picture on the left is the original, and it's been processed a little bit through Lightroom, but it's the original pictures, and it was pretty enough. And there's nothing wrong with the picture on the left, but like I said, you want to go a little bit further sometimes, and I did, and I made the picture on the right by darkening it down, then using a lot of dodging and burning again to bring the light beams to hit the areas I wanted it to hit, and adding light beams. And then I used a lot of texture. Texture is important, so the texture on the log I made jump out a bit with the lights. Now again, what was I trying to bring out here? To me, it was Hobbit country. I could see little leprechauns crawling through the bushes in my mind. See, I went to Notre Dame, so I see leprechauns everywhere. But to me, that's the image I had in my mind. And did it feel like that when I was in the field? Yes, it did. When we were walking, it felt like the image on the right. Okay. Did it look exactly like the image on the right? No, it didn't. It looked more like the image on the left. But to me, it felt very ethereal, very beautiful. I'm trying to bring that feeling out. So it's all about that.
The image on the left is flatter.
Yes,
and
it is.
The one on the right has so much more depth and really impressive.
Fabulous. It's fabulous.
So it's just, so the intention is to bring out the feeling, right? I mean, I could give you the picture on the left and it's good enough, but it is flat. And I could do some stuff to it to bring to more, I could do more to it to bring it out. I just tried to show you a flat before and after, but yes, I could bring out the one on the left without going as far as I did on the right. But my point is, I was trying to get the feeling that I had out in the field, which was really the one on the right.
Was it vignetting that got all the darkness on the sides?
Some of that, yes. I darkened the picture down quite a bit. and then used dodging and burning just to lighten the areas I wanted to with the light beams, and then hitting that fern in the front and some other areas to make it the way it felt, if you will. So then I used a little toning, yellower tone on the picture and things like that, warm up. So that was the idea there. England is the best. Go ahead. Okay. England is the best place you can ever think of hiking, by the way. This one's another kind of picture that I like. I do a lot of black and whites. And when I'm hiking out there, I love textures. I love gnarly looking things. I mean, I'm probably going to use that term now the rest of this workshop, and you're going to go crazy on it. But I like grit. I like gnarly looking textures, things that draw my eyes. And when I walk by these roots, this is again in the Eastern Sierras, you know, what caught my eye, obviously, is that root going up to the branches of the tree there, and then the tree sort of exploding into the sky. I didn't take the picture, and I cropped the picture on purpose without the entire tree being in view, because I wasn't taking a picture of the tree. I was taking a picture of the lines, the roots. And the color to me takes away in that picture. It's not needed. Okay, I could maybe use a color picture here, but to me, that's not what I was taking a picture of. The picture to me were the lines and the grit of that picture. So that's why I went to black and white on it. I don't like black and white a lot. I used Nik Silver Effects for this, and the preset in Nik that I use puts a lot of silver, sort of in this particular, sort of a lot of the silvery tone to the picture. And that, if you do a black and white print, the silvery tones look fantastic in my mind. They just really pop. So that was what I was trying to do. I did add a little detail in the sky in the background. The sky was nothing, so I did replace the sky with a different sky. And that's a trick.
Two different feelings on those. The one on the right is to me is so artistic. The art is really just wonderful in that. However, in the one on the left, I'm more drawn in to want to hike up to that little opening and see. So it's to me it's two totally different emotions. They're very different.
Yeah.
I wouldn't compare them. It's sort of apples and oranges.
Yeah, and you can obviously do more to the one on the left to bring out the tones and the warmth of the.
I like the black and white better.
Yeah.
Personally.
I love both of them for totally different reasons.
Yeah, like I said,
I agree.
Yeah, and you can work with the tones on the left to bring out the gold in the wood there and things like that. It could look nice. I mean, I'm not saying the one on the left is bad. It's just to me.
I think the difference between the two is, in my opinion, the one on the left is new age, and the one on the right to me is kind of old age. If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, and to me, again, go back to what I said in the last workshop. If I were to frame one of them, if I wanted to put one on the wall and frame, and I wanted to spend $200 on a nice frame and have $50 for a nice big print, which one it would be? It would be the black and white in my mind.
Sure.
And that's sort of.
You add clouds.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did add clouds to that.
That was amazing how you did
Yeah.
it.
It is.
Well, it's really not as hard as it looks nowadays, because you could do it several ways, but I have to tell you, I use Luminar for that, and Luminar has a one-click add a cloud feature that just blows your mind. So if you run into add clouds in between really complex things, I don't know how the hell they do it, but they do a really good job. So
yeah, they're phenomenal.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, so that's that one. Then I do have other black and whites. This is a little town in Australia. It's a Western looking town. Australia had the Old West too, so they're very proud of it. But the colors, just the Old West. Come on, it's got to be black and white, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did replace the sky in this. I did a lot of dodging and burning to lighten things, like, for example, the horses there, the guys inside the carriage, because that's the main subject, or the brightest part of the picture is the horse's nose and his hooves there. So your eyes go right to that. And then the rest of it is setting for that. But it's black and white. I did things like enhance the wetness on the ground. If you ever want to enhance wetness, for example, the dehaze slider in Lightroom does a great job. You have to be selective with it, but it does a great job of making things look wet.
Hey, Chuck, unmute Bill. He's settled
Oh,
now.
I'm sorry.
It's like he's been put in the corner and his time is up now.
Okay.
He can unmute himself,
He
can
he
he?
can unmute himself. Bill, you go ahead.
There.
There you are.
There you go.
Okay.
Good. Good. All right. All right. All right. So, anyways, you know, to me, a black and white, especially this kind of picture, it just says black and white. The colors in there don't really do much. In fact, if they're distracting, the yellow star on the right, things like that are a little bit distracting from what the main subject is. So
And that sky is wonderful.
yeah, the sky makes it sort of look. You know, it was raining. You can see the road was wet, so it had been raining. The sky had more detail than that. And then again, if I knew how to take pictures, I would probably not have these problems. This is the subject. I was out in the street and I saw these two people. And what was I thinking of? Of course, I was thinking the period piece that she was in costume. He was not, but boy, he looked cool. I mean, to me, he should have been in costume. So he looked like a character that belonged there. The problem with this picture, obviously, is all the tourists. They were Japanese, I think, or Chinese tourists in the background. And that is distracting as heck, especially with their red umbrellas and all that kind of stuff. We had, let's go. I'm not sure who's coming in now. Anyway, so what I wanted to do is emphasize the subject here. I wanted to make the subjects pop off the screen and de-emphasize everything else. So I actually separated the background and foreground of these things. Lightroom has a great feature called Select Subject, and you can remove that background. So I selected the subjects here. I removed the background onto a different layer so that I could blur it, and then create using a graduated filter. I made the blur less in the front where their feet are and more in the background where the people are. I also darkened it a little bit so that they popped off the screen. And then we talked about grit before and textures. This thing I used the textures on. You can see the sky up above. It's textury. The intent here is to make it look dirty, if you will, textury. I did a lot of work on their skins and things like that to make them look textured, and also desaturated it a tight bit. That kind of look on people, if you ever follow people like Joel Grimes and others, I have a list of the people I follow at the end of this thing. So that's sort of their look. It's sort of a desaturated, gritty sort of look. You can see her dress, how it pops out in the one on the right compared to the one on the left. And I did add a little reflection to his feet to make it down below to enhance the wetness of the street. So emphasize the subject is really the area. If the background is not, you want the background in there on this thing, but you don't really, it does take away. I want the subjects to be the subjects.
And you talked about your eye going to light. In the picture on the left, the building is the light, and your eye keeps going to that.
Yeah, right. And you keep going back to seeing the tourists in the background, and you see, it's just, I like the characters. I just didn't want all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, and again, if you just depending whether you agree or disagree with the end result, that was what I was trying to do. Is I like the characters, not everything else. I like the settings enough to keep it, but not completely change. And sometimes you have to re-envision what your subject is anyways. On this one here, I like when I took the picture, I said, oh my God, cool horse, cool horse. This guy's taking the horse through the barn. I took a quick snapshot like a lot of people, didn't really recompose. I didn't compose it very well, but I did like the horse. And so I got home and I said, the horse isn't the picture, So this is where you said, oh, the subject is something. I re-envisioned this one and said, no, the subject is that guy leading the horse. And so I made instead of landscape cut, I made a portrait cut out of the thing and gave the same sort of gritty look to the thing, darkened the background, blurred the background, and made those guys pop out and become the subject. And they look like they've been rolling in the mud, but that's on purpose, So to me, that was a different subject than the one I originally envisioned. And then if you want to go really far, it's just one of myself. I went down to the garage the other day and took a picture of myself down there with a bad background. This is an example of using a LUT, a light lookup table, for color. And emphasize, first of all, I replaced I replaced the background with a texture that I had in my textures file. I have several hundred textures on Lightroom, just like I have a couple of thousand skies. Well, I had a couple, that was a texture I placed in the background to replace the garage. And then I used some lighting, dodging and burning. You see, I removed the shadows from the glasses on my face as much as I could easily. and then did some dodging and burning, and then gave it a look with that LUT to give it a different look. Of course, it's not a flattering look, but that's not the point. I was trying to make it show you what a LUT can do and make it look quite
You
good.
look mean.
Well, that's it. I'm supposed to look like, you know, a guy from Watch Out, you know. So, but I mean, that's the whole point. You can give it a different look with a LUT, okay? And so it's not meant to be a flattering picture. It's not, but that's okay. I like it. I do like it, actually.
It is. It's nice.
Yeah, it's nice. That's just it. And I go back to, don't let people define what a good photo is. You know, somebody say, well, that portrait in the back is not bad. That's a good portrait, you know. Well, it is. The background stinks. Maybe the lighting was bad because I got my glasses on and shining on my face and things like that. I'm not a portrait. Emily's going gag with a bad picture, right? But I did try to illustrate a point, and I like the results in the end. The right side. This is another one taken in Australia. Taken again with the tree. The tree didn't have enough headroom on it, so I gave it some headroom. This one again, I thought of an oil painting when I thought of this picture. You know, it looked to me. I grew up in Colombia, and there's an artist down there called Campuzano, who I have one of his pieces. My mother passed away about a year ago, and I got this art piece from her by Campuzano. Turns out it's worth about $30,000. Wow. And it's on hanging on my wall. I don't want to tell anybody that.
Wow.
But it's I looked it up and I thought, my God, you know, she's had.
We won't say a thing. Yeah.
No, that's right. It's a fantastic piece. But Campuzano uses on the high plateaus of Colombia. There's a lot of eucalyptus trees, and Campuzano art has a lot of trees like these big eucalyptus that you see here. So it looks to me like a Campuzano painting, and that's what I saw there. So what I did is obviously remove the distractions, first of all, the tourists and the little post on the right corner, and got rid of those things. Then I went around giving the tree some headroom, and then really started emphasizing the grit in the house especially, and everywhere else. I made the road wetter than it would have been otherwise, using the dehaze filter in Lightroom to make the shiny road. And what that does to me is it takes your eyes, leads you down that road. You want to go down there. It's a S turn. So we talked about composition last time. S curves are extremely powerful curves because your eye will follow an S curve, and as the curve turns, it'll jump off right and left to explore the picture. So that's a typical view. So when you say, what's the subject here? Well, the subject is almost the road and the house and the grit there. But that line leads you down through the story where your eye will jump over to the house on the right, maybe the trees on the left, and go down the road all the way down to the trees in the far.
That one's wonderful. I
Great,
love that.
great picture. Great.
Yeah.
And it's
dehaze is a really cool filter. I keep forgetting about it, and it can really do cool stuff. Although if you have spots on your lens,
oh, we'll bring them out.
Oh my God.
Well, the thing is, use dehaze selectively, like I did in this road. I created a separate layer. I went into Adobe Camera Raw, hit dehaze real hard, and then painted it in. You know, so that's just using a dehaze. And then if you notice the trees, I did a lot of dodging and burning to give them dimensionality. I even used a little bit of a yellow tone on my dodging and burning, so I toned it yellow to give it some dimensionality.
I love the trees too.
Yeah, the texture on the tree, the branches, the trunks.
Yeah.
That was again using dodging and burning to bring it out, and also the some of the texture sliders in Lightroom. You know, Lightroom has texture sliders, things like that. So you bring out some textures and stuff. And if you really
it's amazing that the one on the left, my eyes caught the people in the yellow. I don't know if that's a person in a yellow.
It is a person.
Raincoat, but I did notice that they're all gone, and there's in the one on the right, which brings it out so much better.
Well, there's even people down by a little pond, a little further out there, rain jackets and stuff.
Yes.
These Japanese tourists were following me all over the place. And if you look at those guys down there on the road, they're photographers. They got cameras and they're sitting out there with tripods trying to take pictures, and I'm trying to take a picture saying, "Get the heck out of the way." You know?
I just love the one on the right. The building just pops. I mean,
it does pop. Yeah, it does pop.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You've got all the details. The details in the roof stand out. And
yes.
By darkening the sky above, it just adds character and adds the possibility that it may start to rain any minute now.
No. And it rained, it has rained, and it will start to rain. It also brings your eye down. Your eye doesn't go up to the top right, it's darker. So your eye
Right.
tends to stay more in the center. That road really is very strong in terms of where your eye goes. So and if you really want to go far, Photoshop has an oil filter, an oil painting filter. If you want to go all the way to using something really crazy, you can actually turn it into something that looks like an oil painting. I'm not sure I like it, but you can go that far if you want. So
It's different.
it's different. I'm saying and again, it's about having fun. You try it. Maybe you don't like it. So, throw it away. In fact, I don't use that one very often, but when I got to that point, I said, oh, what the hell, try that one, hit that and see what happens. That's what happened. I didn't particularly like it as much as my other one, but that's an example of using one of the filters in Lightroom to try to see what happens. That's an oil painting filter. Now this one is maybe over the top. Maybe it's a village a village called Foy, F-O-E-Y, in southern Cornwall, England, and it's a little fishing village. The tide is out, obviously, and the boats are up on dry land. And the picture on the left is more or less how it looked. The sun was going down on the left. There was not much color in the picture. So what I did on the right is a lot of things, removing some distractions in the front. You can see I added a reflection in the water for the tree.
Oh, yes.
So the boats and the trees are reflected down below.
Birds completely changed out the sky.
This is talk about going over the top. This is like everything, and this is a picture we're going to get into because I try to do everything to it to almost ruin it. So but anyway, so it's a sky replacement. Birds in the picture, gave it a fall color.
Changed seasons.
Change seasons a little bit. So the picture on the right does look a lot different than the one on the left. But
you almost turned it into a Thomas Kincaid painting.
Yeah. Oh heck, I don't want that. I'm going to go.
Almost.
I don't like those paintings. But But the point was to try to do that. In post processing. So I did it. My point is have fun. That's one of the first things I said. Have fun with it. What's wrong with a picture on the right? If it causes somebody to look at it and say, "Wow, that's something neat," and then the second question is, was it really like that? And my answer is usually, is that important? Do you like the picture or not?
Exactly.
Do you like the picture? I mean, I'm talking about art here. I'm not talking about journalism. Okay. So if you want something that's journalistic, it's different. Okay. So this is not journalism. This is creating something that people can enjoy and look at. And again, people will say, well, that's not photography. Well, you're letting somebody else define what photography is for you, because this to me is photography. I used a picture. Something I really enjoy doing, and I have probably 50 of these kind of pictures, is architectural pictures that I turn into sort of Batman scenes. Something out of Batman. I look at big buildings towering above me. This one is in Hong Kong. I see these big towering buildings, and I can see, Batman and they go out of the Castle of Doom or whatever you want to call these things. And so I do take a lot of these pictures. I do nothing about changing their keystoning. The building may keystone like crazy. In fact, I might even emphasize the keystoning a little bit because it makes it look even more powerful and crazy. So this picture is, again, I removed the foreground because I didn't need all that traffic in the beginning. But shooting with the end in mind, I take these pictures of buildings knowing what I'm going to do with them is create this Batman look. Okay, so I'm trying to get down low and look up at the building and creating this sort of ominous looking thing. I do most of this work, believe it or not, in Lightroom and not in Photoshop, although some of it's Photoshop. I separate the background out. I use the clouds in the background. I use a radial blur. There's a blur filter in Lightroom that, in Photoshop. It's called a radial blur that I use, the radial blur on that one. Sometimes you can use a motion blur to make the skies look like it's long exposure and the clouds are moving. Darken the picture down a lot. And then in Lightroom, using the radial filter to add beams of light on the building, to on the edges of the building, things like that. So it's just a look, and I have a lot of those kind of things. There's another one. It's a blur filter, to use beams of light in that. And the sky up above, completely, there were no clouds at all. I created those clouds by using a white brush and creating white splotches and then blurring the heck out of them.
Those
So
are cool.
So that's just a, and the building doesn't look like that in real life at all. And then this is another building in Kuala Lumpur. I did the same thing. I used my own white brushes on the sky behind, blurred them out using a radio filter, and then created this look here. So I take the pictures on purpose to have this sort of diagonal kittywampus looking buildings. They're not taken architecturally like our guy last month would have taken them, straight on, straightened up, and all the other good stuff. They're intended to look. In fact, I even have a keyword in Lightroom. I say fine art, and so I call these my fine art photos of buildings. It's fun. Those buildings in Kuala Lumpur, I think, are the second highest in the world right now. Very tall buildings. So that's the style, and I just happen to like that style. So that's taking those pictures with that in mind. I took the pictures with that in mind. They weren't straight on, and they weren't composed that way. They were composed sort of funny on purpose. Let's talk a little bit about workflow. And then we'll start getting closer into actually looking at a couple of pictures. First of all, I'd say, and John, for you, compartmentalize your workflow. Avoid doing fixes as they come up because it interrupts the creative process. So first of all, what I do is I get into Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw and I fix the picture. I get all the mistakes, all the problems with the picture, I get rid of them. Okay, if there's some distracting things, I'll get rid of them. If there's color problems, I'll fix that fix. Light, contrast, shadows, highlights, all that kind of stuff. I'll get that fixed first, and I try to give myself as good a canvas. So you think of it as a canvas. I give myself as good a canvas as I can to start my creative process. So the picture at the end of starting my creative process is a pretty good looking picture. And some of the ones I show and share and learn are those pictures. I mean, I'll typically show one that's a good photographer would say, hey, that's a good photograph. That's a good picture. It's well composed. I may have recropped it a little bit to help the composition. So all the things you might do here is things like lens corrections, cropping, perspective adjustments, noise removals, sharpening, correcting exposure, things like that. So those things, you fix those things first. Once you finish fixing the picture, then take that same picture. And a lot of times I'll do is in Lightroom, I'll take a virtual copy, if you know what a virtual copy is. Take the picture, create a virtual copy. That way it's not it's a virtual copy, it's not an actual copy. It's not taking up room on my computer. And then I'll take the virtual copy into Photoshop and edit it, okay? And that way I'll have fun with the picture. I'll leave the original picture as it was, but I'll be in Photoshop and edit the heck out of it to see what I can do, where else I can take it. And that, of course, don't do that with every picture, only the pictures that sort of inspire me to do that. So on the creating part, you strengthen your vision and you pull your story out of the image. The first part, you're pulling the details out of the image. Second part, you're pulling the story out of the image. So these techniques are more creative. They're right brain, they're free flowing. The other techniques before were more left brain, more mechanical. A lot of times, unfortunately, that's where people end. They end with a mechanical. They go to Lightroom, they hit auto, they hit the profile, they say, looks pretty good, highlight, shadows, and that's it. They don't go any further with the picture. That's okay, that's the fixing part. I like to go further. So these techniques include things like color grading, dodging and burning, light painting, sun glows, sky replacements, possibly, things like that. You go just a little further. So I would think in terms of workflow, I'll show you a workflow. That's editing. I do everything first in editing, then I get into creating. So complete the cycle. This means when you go to take the picture initially, think about how you're going to use it. So the subjects, when you're out in the field, subjects that you maybe in the past wouldn't have taken pictures of, you might still dare now take a picture of because of what you don't know you can do with it. So it gives you a new perspective, and to me, a new excitement about going out in the field and taking pictures, because now you can do something with these things. Scenes that you previously disregarded may draw your attention. You might explore different angles, different creative methods of the camera, like focus stacking, slow shutters, things like that. And you will maybe catch yourself taking pictures of isolated elements like skies and textures and stuff like that. So go ahead and have some fun out there. I do think it impacts how you go out in the field once you've done this kind of stuff. Before I get into actually showing you a picture and editing one, and I'll give you a copy of this thing in the end, these are my favorite people that I follow. I've been a Kelby One subscriber ever since I can remember. I can't remember when I wasn't, but I'm sure there was a time, it was probably 20 years ago when he started or something. I've been a Kelby One subscriber forever, and I still use it religiously. There's a lot of people here going down. That third one down, Aaron Nace on Flern, is really, really good. And that's YouTube. You go out there and go to YouTube and look for Flern. Aaron Nace is pretty good. Glenn Dewis let me go. Glenn Dewis, Jeff Cable, Joel Grimes, and Calvin Hollywood. All those are portrait photographers, do fantastic work, especially Jeff Cable. Emily, I know you like portraits. Look at these guys, especially I think it was Jeff Cable, Joel Grimes. They do a lot of pictures of athletes, and they do composites. They take the athlete in a studio and they take pictures of athletic backgrounds like football fields and stuff in the back, and then do compositing. So they always have one of the has a great, I can't remember her name. She's a women's soccer player, a goalie. He has a picture of her flying through the air, sort of horizontally blocking a goal shot. Well, the picture was taken in a studio, but the final picture is a beautiful shot in the stadium and all that kind of stuff. So he does a lot of that kind of stuff, and that's his signature. He does that all the time. So Flern is one of the ones I like a lot. Matt Kluskowski, a lot of us went to a workshop earlier this year. I've seen Matt a lot. Pixin Perfect, Unmesh Dinda. Of course, the name like Unmesh is Indian. And if you ever go look at his videos on YouTube, he's a very interesting looking guy. He has the thickest eyebrows I have ever seen in my life. but Unmesh is really neat. He is a genius on Photoshop. I mean, the guy is just a genius. So I'll look at Unmesh quite a bit. And so some of these other, Colin Smith over there is so currently my favorites probably are Pixin Perfect, Photoshop Cafe on the right-hand side with Colin Smith, and Flern with Aaron Nace. Those three I'm looking at a lot now. Colin Smith is really great too. His background is primarily graphic design, but he really knows Photoshop in depth, and he's got a lot of free stuff out on YouTube. And once a week now, he's actually doing a little workshop, short workshop, free workshop. So Colin Smith is really good. I think he's Scottish. Doesn't come across too hard with his accent, but I think he's Scottish. So those guys are my favorite, and I'll give you a copy of that. But and I know you guys probably all have yours too. There's probably some good ones out there. Okay, let's just skip over a little bit. Hopefully you see Lightroom here. You see Lightroom?
Yes.
Okay, you can see some of the things. Just looking at this picture here, Emily, you're in our PP SIG, right?
I'm a what?
On the post-processing SIG, Emily?
Yeah.
I'll just show you what I did to one of the pictures.
That's awesome.
That's crazy. This is this picture here that Chris gave us. So that's the final result.
Wow.
And then remember that style I talked about before? That's a different view of that.
Ooh, yeah.
Wow.
So you can
futuristic.
Yeah, so you can do some different things. We won't get into those, but these are for post-processing SIG. I got some others here. Let me go. I'm going to take this picture here and actually bring up Photoshop here. Let me bring Photoshop in here. Okay, this is this picture here. I guess you can see Photoshop here now.
Yeah.
On the right-hand side, you see the layers here. If I turn off the layers, I call this layer the over-the-top layer. You know, the creative layer, and then the editing layer. So here's the original picture here. Okay, you can see I've grouped things together, so that's a group. So I'll open up that layer, and I've color coded them. Okay, and I tend to name my layers so I know what I did on these layers. So if I start off, for example, and if I take off the distraction here, you can see the masts on the ship there pop in and out.
Mm-hmm.
So I did my removing on a separate layer rather than do the removing and the cloning and stamping on the layer itself. I do it on a separate layer. Just a couple of things. I'll go through this thing quickly. This is the initial edits. So if I take these things off, that's the initial edits on the picture. Here's the original. And I did that in Adobe Camera Raw. You can see that. Okay. So the nice thing is if you look at this picture, you'll see a little bit of an icon here next to it. That means it's a smart object. And it means I can go back into Adobe Camera Raw and actually open up Adobe Camera Raw and re-edit that. So anytime you create a smart object, there's Adobe Camera Raw. That's the image there. I can go through and change. So what would I have done to this picture? First of all, you know, you hit auto, right? And then you pick a profile. So these are the profiles here. If you're in Lightroom, the profile, you might have a lot more profiles depending on for example, in Lightroom, landscape is one of my favorite profiles, Adobe Landscape. But I just pick modern, but profiles will change the look of the picture slightly. See, for example, that's modern 7. It's artistic something else. I got a little more fall color in that one. So I can go with a fall color if I want, or I can go with a modern 7, which is just a sort of, so the first two things that I do is one, I hit auto. The second is I play around with profiles. Okay, that gives me a good starting point. The other kinds of things you can do here is this has a very slight S curve to it. So I did do a little curves adjustment on the thing. Let's see what it did. So I you know, darkened it down, a couple of things like that. But then anyways, that's the S curve. You can actually, I raised the reds on their S curve. I went up to the reds here and pulled them up a little bit, give it a little bit more of a red tone. So you can do things with the curve. You may or may not agree that that's a better picture with the curves or not, but the point is just trying to show you what it can do. By pulling the reds up, it gave it a little bit of a red tone of the picture, more of a sunset look. Okay, so that's just using the reds and the curves here. The general curve itself, I gave a slight S turn to it. So that's using curves. That's basically what I did. The basic adjustments here, you can see they've all been done. That's because I did auto. Auto does that for me. Okay, the most important thing auto does, it sets the white and black points. So it went to the white. If I go to hold down the Option key and hit white, you can see there's some white points in there. I can back and forth on that thing. And where you want the whites to be is just when they start to appear, because you don't want to blow out everything. The same with the blacks. If I hit the Option key, there are some black points in there, and I can fool around with that. But auto, if I hit auto, it does that for me automatically. I don't have to do anything else. There's a little clarity. I didn't add much clarity to it. I could. See, I'm re-editing this picture as I talk. Add some more texture to the picture. Maybe some vibrance to it. And now I can go back out. And there it did the re-edits. So if you do a smart object, the way you get a smart object, by the way, is going up to Filter and Convert to Smart Object. This is already a smart object, so it's grayed out. So if you have a layer, go up to Filter, Convert to Smart Object. Now you have a smart object. Anything you do to it will be re-editable. And what is a smart object? One of the ways to think about it, it's a, oh shoot, let me go to, what the heck did I do with Photoshop here? A smart object is essentially a Photoshop format is what, PSD, I think, or something like that. A smart object is essentially a PSD file inside a PSD file. So anything I do to this thing here gets added to it here. So if I, for example, go into this smart object and I add image adjustment brightness, and I add a brightness, little brightness to the image here, okay? Now you'll see down here,
Oh, it added it.
brightness appears here, right? If I want to fix that brightness, I can double click on that now, and it brings it back up again, and I can change it. Okay, so later on in the picture, I can go back and forth with a smart object and keep on changing that, right? So I used Adobe Camera Raw and that brightness filter here to do my initial edits, and then I did a remove. I removed those masks. Oh, you see why that? Oh, heck. You can see why now they show up here. The reason is I changed brightness. I changed the brightness. I didn't change the brightness on this other thing. So basically, the way I did the removal. Let me take that here and take it off. So I want to remove those masks. So I have this layer here. I hit the little plus icon, layer mask here. So now the masks are there. I can go to my, let's go to the healing. I'll use this healing tool here, and I'll make sure that it's content aware, texture, proximity, and sample all layers is on. This is important, so it samples the layers below, right? Now if I go through and I start to remove this thing here, you know, I'm doing a sloppy job on it, but basically, you know, I can do a better job than that, but you can go through here and remove this thing. Okay, let's just say I got that done here.
If you're doing a straight line,
Yeah, you can
hold the shift key down and tap
right.
each end, it'll do an absolutely straight line.
Yeah, so what Emily's talking about is you can see where I'm at this point here. Say I want to take control out. I can click once there. Click once there, go down, click once there. Click once there, click once there. Click once there, and click once there. Okay, so now I've removed the things. You can see it's on a separate layer. So if I turn that layer on and off, it's still there, but I've removed it. Okay, so now that layer is a separate layer. The reason I do it on a separate layer is non-destructive. Okay, so I can close my little editing group, open up my creative group here. So what did I do in the creative group? Okay, I used some smart filter here. I created a reflection here. So if I take this reflection, you can see I added a reflection in there.
Mm-hmm.
How did you do that? Is it smooth? How did you smooth it?
Well, the way I did a reflection was, and I'll do a real dumb and quick one here, just to show you what I did. If you look at some of the things I did here, smart filters, reflection, overall curves, dodge, burn. Let me go. I'm going to turn off this this curve here. Let me just turn off that. What I would have done for the reflection here is I'm going to do it quick and dirty here. I actually use the pen tool to do this. I'm just going to, I did a little bit better selection than this, but it's the idea is the same. Okay, I'm just going to go up here. Okay, I'm going to do Command C, copy. Oops, second, I'm on the wrong. Let me go down, and I have to be on that layer there. I have to be on the layer that I'm trying to copy. The reason I gave me an error is I was on a layer that wasn't active. So I'm on this layer. I can do Command C and Command V. Now it pasted, you can see right down here, it pasted that piece right on top. So all I did was Command C, copy, Command V, paste, right? Then I go to edit. Now this one's a little hard because it's not a horizontal horizon, okay? Transform, flip vertically. Come on, let's go to C. Edit, transform. Okay, it's not going to do that. I have to select this thing.
Oh, you're not on the, oh yeah, you
No,
are.
I wasn't on the right layer here.
Yeah.
Edit. I don't know why this is transform, flip vertically. Why won't you do that? Okay. Oh, see, it's below. It's below. This other one's here. This other one's here. That's what. That's it. The other one was on top and turned on. Now I can move this layer down here, and I have to warp this one since it's not a horizontal horizon. The building one I showed you before, Emily, was nice horizontal. This one I have to warp into place. So this kind of thing you do and edit, free transform or transform, warp. You know, I'm going to do this really quick and dirty, so it's not. You can see these boats are not. I would use puppet work for this too. Mm-hmm. But you start to get the idea. If I do, let's see that one, and then I do edit, puppet warp. You know what puppet warp is? Yeah. The puppet warp is sort of a really crazy tool, but I can get this thing and start to pull it into place where I want it. So anyways, all I'm doing is forcing this thing to align for the shore. And this one's hard because it's not it's much easier when you have a nice horizontal one. Well, that'd be the first step. Let's just say that's good enough for now. Then what the next thing I would do, I'm not going to go through a lot of, might make this a smart object, but I won't do that right now. I'll just do image, adjustment, level. The reflections are usually darker than the land, so I'll make that a little darker. Then I would do a, let's see, filter.
Transparency.
What's that?
The how transparent the layer is.
Yeah, the layer is not transparent at all yet, but I can fool with that later. And then the next thing I'll do is put a blur on it, and I'll put maybe a motion blur. You see what it did here?
Mm-hmm.
The motion blur is usually away from the shore, so I can change the direction of the motion blur by doing this kind of thing. And then I can blur it to me so it looks okay. So I've got a motion blur going that way. And then if I want to, I can take this and I can change the opacity of this layer a little bit, you know, to bring back some of the water that was underneath it. And so basically that's how I get my, you know, that kind of thing, being a little bit more careful with it. But so you go from that picture to that picture, okay? So the steps really is get the highlight, flip it over, bring it down, blur it out, darken it a little bit, blur it a little bit with using the motion blur.
I'd forgotten about puppet warp. I haven't used that in a long time.
Now, of course, that's pretty difficult with this one here. If you go back to another picture, that's okay. On Lightroom, this particular picture here that Chris gave us, you can see I put a reflection. Now this is easy because it's flat.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So all I did is flip it and bring it down. You know,
yeah,
it's a flat reflection. It's pretty easy to do. There's other things you can do to enhance it even more by using something called a let's see, displacement map. If you want to give ripples to the water, I could even do that and put ripples in the water so that the reflection has a ripple to it. That's using a displacement map, but I won't go that far. So that's basically a tool there that I will take off, open this back up, and so that's the editing. Open that one back up, which is now the creative part of it. The other thing I'll do is that's the reflection. You see the reflection right here. I added an overall curve to this image here. That was just for contrast. So that's that curve there. And then I did some dodging and burning. How do I do dodging and burning? Okay, that's using. There's two ways of doing dodging and burning. I never do dodging and burning on the original picture itself. Okay, I just don't like to actually do it there. What I'll do, for example, is let's turn off this dodging and burning. You see what the dodging and burning did here. See the trees and some of the light on the boats and stuff. Okay, so I even added a warming dodging and burning to bring some warmth to the top of the trees. So the way I did that, let me turn those layers off, is I'll get. Remember, I'm editing the bottom picture here. So I'll start off by adding a new layer to it. Okay, I'll end up filling that layer by doing shift delete, filling that layer with 50% gray. Okay, now you can't see anything, but I'll change the blend mode. Remember blend modes to overlay. Now, what do these blend modes do? Okay, if I go through here, this group of blend modes tends to darken everything. It takes the darker pixels and does different things with it. Why is this jumping over here? So let's go back to these darken, these lighten, takes the lighter ones. Overlay takes the midtones, grays, 50% gray. So if I take 50% gray, you'll now, if I turn this layer on and off, you see no difference. And why? Because it blanks out anything that's 50% gray. But if I take my brush, my dodging and burning tool, dodging and burning is over here, So one is dodge is lighten, burn is darken. So if I'm taking the lighten tool, I'm hitting midtones because this is gray, midtones. My exposure, I'm going to take the exposure down a little bit. If I now take this dodging tool and start going over the trees with it, I can lighten up areas of the trees that I want to highlight. And start to, you can see if I turn this off and on, those trees, light changes. So why is it doing that? Because I'm actually lightening up the gray. The gray disappears, but as I dodge, it gives a lighter, the gray gets lighter, so you start to see it. And alternatively, if I burn, it gets darker. So if I'll just burn somewhere that's obvious, I can, take this house here and get the little bit of, go with the exposure up a little bit so you can see it. So if I turn this thing on and off, you can see that I've changed some things. So that's basically one method of doing dodging and burning. Another method is, of course, do it right on the picture itself, which I don't like to do. Another one is add a blank layer, but don't fill it with gray. Change the blend mode to overlay again. Now I can just paint with a regular brush with white. I change the default here, hit D for default, black and white. I'll hit X to toggle it back and forth. White is going to be dodging because it's going to be lighter, and black is going to be, so if I start to hit spots of light here, now that's pretty high opacity. I'm going to run the opacity down because those spots of light are too bright. But you can see I can start to add spots of light on here with my white brush. And it's not bringing white in, it's bringing light color in. So I can do some things like that. If I want to do something tricky, like I add a little bit of a yellow tone to the picture, for example, I can bring in a yellow brush instead and make it more yellow. So I can do a lot of, this is painting, this is essentially painting with light. That's what I've been talking about. You can brighten up the beach if I want to, have a little too much on that one. But essentially this is what I call painting with light, making things pop and look a little bit more interesting. So that, in the end, you've got something that looks different than what you had before. And of course, in this one, I might want to do some dodging and burning down here since they're reflections, but that, so that's essentially what I did on this layer here, brought it out. There's some warming tones that I added to the trees. So that's my creative layer. And then my over the top layer, I went into Luminar and did some things, and a camera raw. And what did I do in Luminar? Okay, well, let me turn this layer off. And I want to sky replacement, like the crazy thing with sky replacement. Let's just do something real simple here. I know what it is, over the top. I'll just leave that there. Here. I'm just going to create what's called a stamped layer. This layer here I just created is everything below it. It's a flat image. It's flattened right now. Okay, so I can turn everything below it off, and you can see it's still there. So that's just a flatten. But the reason I wanted to do this, I want to demonstrate sky replacement in Luminar, if you haven't seen it. So I'm going to go to Filter, Luminar. If you haven't seen this, Luminar is one of those things I think is worth getting, just for some of the simple things it does.
How much is it?
It's probably 60, 70 bucks.
A one-time thing?
Yes, one-time thing. Yeah, that's right. And let's see if it comes back up here. Let's go. There it comes. So I want to do some things with this. Luminar itself has a lot of artificial intelligence, the AI enhance. Sometimes I'll just go in here and look at the AI filter, see what it does to it, to see what Luminar thinks is intelligently done, and sometimes that's good. Sky enhance usually just deepens the blues. Okay, but there's other things you can do here. For example, I can go over to this little creative tab. This is the one that, here's the sky replacement deal here. And I can select the sky. Let's just do a dramatic sunset here, 3 for the heck of it. Okay, done. That's it. No masking, no nothing. Done.
Wow.
And what's sort of neat about that is if you look at it, it actually relights the image itself a little bit.
Sure does. Sure does. Yeah.
It does relight the image some. You see that?
Yeah.
The image itself. So I can go through here and pick skies, you know, and get different effects out of it. Or I can go here and go say custom sky, and it'll take me over to my skies that I've got in my, you know, I've got hundreds of sky pictures, and say, you know, I like this one here, and I'll open that picture here and take that picture. Okay. Let's see, it's going to bring it in. There it is. So it can take a different sky in. Now the trouble is with this sky is the light seems to be behind the mountains, and I want the light to be hitting here. So I can flip that sky around by go to advanced settings, flip sky. Okay. So the Luminar, you know, if you're into sky replacements, I've done a lot of sky replacements, but I got to this, I thought, my God, why do I need anything else? And then of course, if you're into forests, like I showed you the last one, and I can, you know, I can do things like create a second. This is probably not going to be good for sunbeams, but you can create sunbeams here. You can see some of the sunbeams coming in. Maybe
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little hard to see here because I don't have them, but penetration.
Cool. Is that how you did that in that forest scene?
Yes, that is, I'll admit. Yeah, but anyways, that's the, and then I can hit apply here, and it'll go back to Photoshop and apply those changes that I just made there. This is the creative part. That's why you fix the picture first, and then you can have fun with it. Okay, then you can go out and start doing some stuff. So that creates a whole different look to the picture than I had originally. So if I have the pictures before, this is the dodge and burn layer, the layer before that. So let's see, and that's the latest layer. So anyways, that's and then you know, the over the top layer is this one here. That was the other layer I had, which with birds in it. Oh, Luminar add bird. You can add birds in Luminar too. I should have done that to you. So if you go to this one here and I go back to Luminar, some of these things get stupid. You know, that's what the heck, right?
So can you add individual birds so that the wings are in different
Well,
positions?
What I would do is add. Yeah, you can do. Let's go to. You can Skyloom. You can add different things, and then you could mask them out, and they'd give you a bunch of birds, and then you come back here and use masking to get rid of the ones you don't want. You know.
Okay, cool.
So that'll be that's a good way to do that. So anyway, let me go back here. Just if I wanted to add some birds to this picture, go back to the creative. This is augment and sky. It doesn't have to be just birds. You know, I could do. I mean, birds are one thing. I can do fireworks. Oops, they're back here. I have to move it. Place object. Okay. Fireworks. So you can do different things. I mean, and some of this is silly, but that's you know, some of it's silly. It's a lot silly. You know, there's some birds.
Oh, look at that. Okay.
So you can do that. So I can go back and apply. So that, you know, that's the fun of doing some of this stuff, and that's what I encourage you guys to have fun. That's about all I've got for today. I hope I didn't drive you too nuts.
That was great.
Okay.
I really enjoyed it. Rob's not going to be happy because I want to buy Luminar, I think.
Yeah, this is great.
But you know, the thing with Luminar is that you can get some really crazy pictures and go into Luminar with it. And it'll replace through all the branches and everything else. Let me just take, this is another picture that, let me get one that has a lot of heavy branches in it. This one here, let me go to a folder in library. I'm gonna go to the original picture of this one here.
Yeah.
And replace the sky in it. Well, you can see, this is a different version of that same picture with see, that's the color version, but that I put Luminar themes in there, and I did all sorts of crazy ass things. It's amazing what you can do. But let's just take this picture here, and I'll edit that one. I can go to Lightroom to Luminar also. Okay, so I'm going from Lightroom to Luminar directly rather than, and I'm going to copy and edit. So you can go from Photoshop or you can go from Lightroom, and that either one works. When it comes up, I show you, this one has all those branches and stuff. So if you want to replace skies,
Yeah, because I have not had a lot of luck doing that.
Well, Luminar does a pretty amazing job. It really does. It uses, again, artificial intelligence. Okay. So
Chuck,
what's that?
stupid question.
Sure, no.
But after you've been in Photoshop, Adobe Camera Roll, Lightroom, Luminar, and you've done all these changes, when you go to save this, it's saving it back to the original picture?
No, it does not save over the original picture. No, you just hit save, and it'll save it as a PSD file.
Okay.
Or a TIFF file. The original picture may have been a RAW file or a JPEG.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know, and here's an example of a very hard sky to replace, right? So
Yeah.
if I go into a sky replacement in Luminar, select sky, I'm going to just use a nice blue sky, a blue. There you go. You like that?
Wow. Wow.
It's pretty cool, right? That's
Yeah. How does it do
Luminar can
that?
have some business this afternoon from a few people.
Well, that's what I mean about, why not? I mean, why would you not do that? I mean, this picture,
Exactly.
oh, I mean, this
Wow.
this picture is fine. I'm not critical of it. I liked it. It's the reason I took the picture of it, But this picture's a little better. So yeah. So and you can do all sorts of things. There's galaxies here. Here, galaxy. What's galaxy? Okay, now it's a night sky.
Oh.
Okay. So you can do some pretty crazy things. Starry night too.
Wow.
There's the Milky Way back here.
Wow.
So you can create some pretty silly things. Sunset clouds, dramatic sunset. You got different things, and sometimes you go in here and you find some of the masking isn't perfect, but it's pretty darn good. I mean,
Yeah.
If I go in here close, you look at, the skies in here that it's done a great job.
Yeah.
And you don't see any haloing in there. It's
Yeah. Amazing.
okay.
Luminar is just a one-time buy, correct?
It is a one-time buy.
Yeah.
They should
Okay.
give you a commission, Chuck.
Well, I recommend it. I mean, it's just something that I like doing it. That's
It
all.
also offers updates.
Yeah, it does.
Free charge.
They once a year. I mean, through the year they give you updates, and then once a year or once every 18 months they come up with a new version that you have to buy, but at a discount.
If you want it.
If you want it, it's true. You don't have to buy it. You're right. So it'll give you a discounted price.
When you say you don't work on the original picture, this is another question that I'm comfortable enough asking you all, and I wouldn't have asked you 2 years ago. You say you don't work in the original picture, so what do you do?
I mean, if I let's say I want to work on this mountain picture here, okay, I can say I'm right-clicking. I'll say edit in Photoshop. There's a couple of ways of doing this, and so I say edit in Photoshop, and it's going to come up and ask me. Second, it's a raw file, so it's actually going to bring it into the raw editor in Photoshop if it ever comes up. Let's see.
But I mean, you never overwrite a raw file.
No,
I
you
don't
never
know how
do.
you'd even do that.
So this
The raw is always there.
So the raw is always there. So it's coming up now as an NEF file that's raw. If I save this file back, it's going to go back as a PSD. So it doesn't overwrite the raw file. So if I do something to this picture, go in there, replace the sky, and then save it. File save. If I go back into Lightroom now, a second. Don't save that. If I go back into Lightroom now, you're going to see here's a PSD file. Let me go back here. Here's the original one that I opened, and here's a PSD file next to it now.
Okay.
I didn't do anything to it. The other way to do things
You edited it, right?
Yeah, it's edited. You can
change
see
edit. Okay.
So
No.
when you edit and then save it as,
Yeah, well,
then
you
it'll
don't
come,
you don't have to save as, just save.
just
Just
save.
it-
Okay.
Okay.
Because
not-
it'll be a PSD automatically.
It'll automatic, and since it's a PSD, it's not overwriting the original raw file. So,
That's
Okay.
okay. That's good information.
well, the
It
other,
automatically labels it as edit,
oh, well, it's in,
or,
you have to, it's in preferences somewhere, how you say it.
okay,
So,
okay.
now what I tend to do, you see the green colors here? When I edit a picture, I turn it green. You know,
Ah,
Oh, yes.
so I'll if the unedited pictures are other colors, if it's green, it's edited. Okay.
Hmm.
Since I just created this picture and I don't want it, I can go ahead and delete this picture. Now there is something else that I'll do. For example, if I do edit a picture and I like what I've done, but I want to do something else with it just for the fun of it, I can do this. See if I have one here that shows. I don't show any. Okay, well, obviously here's one of the sky. Okay, so it's been edited. It's a PSD file. But say I want to do so. I want to keep this picture. I want to keep it because I work for whatever. But I want to do some more with it. I could go in. I'll right click on that thing, and say I'll create a virtual copy of it. Okay, virtual copies are really neat. Now it created a virtual copy. You know it's a virtual copy by that little tab on the bottom. Virtual copies take up no space on your computer. So I didn't create a new file. I created a virtual copy. So it's virtual. It's not really there. But I can edit this. I can do anything to it. So I can go to, say, for example, I wanted to change it. I can, oh, let's go back to, oops, second. Let's go back to the grid. I'm sorry. Hit the wrong thing. The virtual copy of the thing. Where am I? Down here.
So if you create a virtual copy,
Yeah.
but it's not really there, how would you find it again?
Well,
Or does it disappear
No.
if you just do not do anything with it?
It's going to be there. It's going to be there forever until I delete it. Okay.
It just doesn't fill your hard drive.
Doesn't hit that. So the nice thing is, for example, let's say I got this picture. I say, I wonder what that would look like in black and white, right?
Yep.
But I don't want to change this from the black and white. I like it in color too. So I can take the virtual copy here. I can go over to my develop module, and I can go to my basic here, go to black and white, and then I can start playing with the black and white if I want to. You know, I'll take the blues down to make it dark sky. I can add a radio filter to the thing here, invert it, give it a second, invert the darn thing. So I'll put some light on the stone here, put it up here, wherever. This is the spotlight that if you didn't bring a light to the field with you, I can light different things with it. You know? And I don't like it. You know, those buildings I talked about that gave the lighting effect. I can add light along that rock over there. So now I've done some edits and go back to my library now. Now I've got a color version, a black and white version, and this one doesn't take up any room on the drive. If I want,
I'm sorry, where did you get the virtual? I'm sorry.
I'll show you in a second. Okay. The nice thing is I can export this virtual as a real file if I want to, right? I can take the virtual file and I can export it as a JPEG or something like that, right? So I do have the file. I mean, it's there. Now, how I got that, we're going back just one step. So if I don't have that file, if I hit delete on that file, it's going to ask me remove the selected virtual copy. See, it doesn't say delete it says remove it because it's not there. So I remove it. Okay, so now it's not there. Okay, going back to the beginning, how I got there, I right-clicked on it. Okay, and then I went
original.
On the original. So I went to the original. I right-clicked on it, and then I went down and said create a virtual copy. And it put a virtual copy next to that little tab on it. See that little tab on the corner?
Mm-hmm.
That tells me it's a virtual copy, not a real copy. So now I can do anything. I can go into Photoshop with this. I can go to Nick. I can do, I can edit this thing in oh heck. Have you ever guys ever watched Nick? Ever gone into Nick software? Copy with Lightroom adjustments. Go. Oops, it's going to create a copy of it. I should have said original. It's going to go into Nick software here. If you've never seen Nick, it's another crazy piece of software. Let me see, come up. So it's in Nick software now. I can do a lot of different things. Let's see, polarization. There's a lot of different filters in Nick. So anyways, Nick is like Luminar, but it's another one of the crazy softwares. Oops, let me go over here. So there's a lot of different filters here, detail extractors. There's the before, there's the after. And if you really want to go crazy, HDR look, you know, and what you can do is you can adjust the look here at the end. But it's the kind of thing that Nick does. It colorizes, colors, detail extractor. What is this? There's foliage, glamour glow. There you go, glamour glow. If you want a nice glow to the picture here. So you know you can do different things. So that Nick is pretty cool too.
That was great.
So that's what you can do with virtual copies. You can create a virtual, then you can go out and edit it with something else and create a different version of that same picture. You know.
Well, this has been very inspiring.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, good. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
We did.
Okay.
Very
Good.
much. Learned a lot.
As always, thank you.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Chuck.
Yeah. Well, have a good weekend, guys. Okay.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Chuck, I know you worked hard on this. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Well, look at any time you come back, you want some special instruction, I can do that too.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I want to learn how to make my own brushes.
Oh yeah, that's not hard. That's not.
Tutorial.
Oh, that's not hard at all. That is not. I should do that. That isn't hard actually. It's surprisingly simple. It's just almost like one click in Photoshop.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Cool. Well,
All right.
maybe I can Google it.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks.
Well, take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for the late ad as well.
What's that?
I thank you for the late ad. I appreciate it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Sorry you weren't able to come in earlier.
Yeah, well,
Okay. All right.
thank you. Bye.
Okay. We take care.